Hey everyone, this is Trent from ExtremeRigs.net, and today we have a unboxing video for the Nvidia GTX Titan Waterblocks. Today we have the first 3 out of the 8 or so blocks that I'll be running thermal tests on to see which is the best thermal performer, which gives you the best cooling performance for your Titan. And so the first 3 to come in are AquaComputer, EK, and Koolance. So a big thanks to the companies for sponsoring these. I can do these kind of reviews without them, so if you ever have an opportunity, thank them, let them know that it's useful. So let's start off with AquaComputer because I'm a big fan of alphabetical order. I've actually opened all of these already because I was a real idiot and forgot to turn the camera on the first time. And so I've already unboxed these once. Let's call it a practice run. So they may not be quite perfect as they would be when you get them, but they should. I tried to put them back exactly as they were. Anyway, so AquaComputer. This one came all the way from Germany in pretty much record time. Big thanks to AquaComputer for that. So, not too much in the box. It is a pretty big box considering the size of the water block. Packed with this plasticky foamy stuff. And like I said, not too much in the box. You get the instructions, which are in English and German. They're a German company, so that makes sense. And then you get your little bag of goodies. There's not too much in here. The screws to mount the block. 2 stock fittings, a little Torx head screwdriver, and a thermal strip of tape. The Torx head screwdriver does not appear to be used for anything on the blocks. The actual screws on the block to hold the top plate in, they are hex. What are they? They look like Allen key, like hex bolts to me. So I don't think it's used for that. So maybe it's for removing the air cooler on the Titan. But we'll see once we get the Titan block in. That is being sponsored by EVGA, who are pretty badass. So here's the AquaComputer block. I believe you can get this in a couple of different versions, like a nickel-plated version. This is bare copper, and the top plate here will be stainless steel. From there you can probably barely make out the logo, but it says AquaComputer Cryographics, which is Cryographics is the water block name. And then you get a little Titan text on the corner there. So if you look at the back of the block, you have the raised area for the GPU, and then for the memory you have these raised sections. Interesting to see that they've broken them up. Normally on water blocks they just put one big thing because they're kind of lazy. I don't think it really matters. And then the VRM section here with cutouts for the caps and everything else. So, not much to talk about here. I do like the way AquaComputer mixed the metals. I think it really works for their design. The only other thing I will mention is this end bridge. It's removable. There's 3 bolts in there that attach to the main block. AquaComputer sells different size bridges so that you can easily link multiple cards together. I love manufacturers who use bridges. Of course you don't need them. You can just use SLI fittings or even tube if your cards are spaced wide enough. I'm a big fan of the bridge. I think they look good, and they can be more reliable depending on whether you can manage to hook them up properly and what type of SLI fitting you use. Some are more robust than others. So that is the AquaComputer. The block is super thin. You probably can't see it well here. I would imagine if a reference cooler compatible Titan that was a single slot card was released, that this would be a single slot compatible water block. However, you would need a different bridge. And right now the Titan has, all the Titans release it for all reference cards, and they have a double stack DVI, so they're always a dual slot. So unless you're willing to yourself solder the dual DVI, then you're definitely not getting a single slot card anyway. So it's something to bear in mind. Potential for the future. So let's go on to the EK card. Big fan of EK packaging. It's very consistent across all the lines. I happen to have one of the pumps here. You can see again, same style. And they use different colors for different types of things. So orange, all the blocks seem to be orange. I guess the pumps must be red. The reservoirs are kind of turquoisey blue. I guess it's cyan color. Anyway, it doesn't matter. The circles, of course, EK's CSQ theme, the circles theme. It was introduced a while back, and there was a lot of initial hatred, as well as some long-term discontent. And so EK eventually said, okay, we're going to set up this thing called ThinkCell, which is a way for you, the end user, to go and vote on designs. This was not the first ThinkCell product, but it is one of the first few. So EK put up 3 different designs, one with more circles, one with a few circles, and one with no circles, and users can vote it on their favorite, and the no circle pan won. And so EK made it without circles. So props to them for making a U-turn, listening to the community and all that kind of stuff. I had actually got used to the circle theme and kind of liked it on some of the blocks. On the GPUs it was often a little too busy for me, but for example the Supremacy, I think it looks really good, but it's a personal thing. A lot of people don't like it. You gotta make sales. So standard packaging. If you've ever had an EK, at least a recent EK product, you'll know this looks very familiar. As usual, the top compartment includes the accessories. Here we have 2 bags and the instructions. Instructions just in English. So you get a little bag with the screws, the washers, 2 stop fittings, and an Allen key for the stop fittings for tightening those. You also get some little shims for fittings. Sometimes on some products the threads are not that deep into the block, and if you have a fitting with very long threads, you'll run out of thread as you're screwing the fitting in, and then it'll leak because you need the O-ring to seal, and if the O-ring isn't tied up against the block, it's not going to seal. So sometimes you need to use these shims, so it's good that they included them. It may mean that there's not that many threads on the block. We'll check that in a second. Or it might mean that other people haven't included them and they should have done. Hard to say. So thermal pads for the memory and for the VRMs. More than AquaComputer gave you, and that's because AquaComputer on their block, they're expecting you to use TIM on the memory chips rather than thermal pads. Thermal pads generally are what most companies use. If you have the tolerances right and everything else, then of course you can use TIM, as long as there's a good connection. So that's that. And there are a few versions of this block. So this is the Plexi nickel version. So what that means is the top cover is made out of Plexi, so it's see-through. Obviously you can see the inside of the nickel-coated copper. And so, again, nickel on the back. So for those of you who know nothing about water cooling, nickel plating is fairly common. It is just that, it's plated. So you mill out your copper block, and then the nickel is a very thin layer on top of the copper. it's so thin it doesn't affect performance, so it's really an aesthetic choice. You know, do you like the silver look, do you like the copper look? Some people worry about nickel, and so you know, they choose to go with copper only. But it's pretty hard to go with full copper setup, because it's hard to get, you know, most people don't want to use brass barbs, for example. Most people have nickel-plated barbs anyway, so. So there are options. You can get the plexi nickel like this, you can get plexi copper, and then you can get acetyl copper. So acetyl would be a black plastic top instead, so it's non-see-through. Acetyl is generally regarded as a better material. It's less likely to crack, for example. However, plexi has the advantage of looking cool, particularly if you run docks. Again, like the AquaComputer, you have the removable bridge option on here, and you can buy different size bridges. So you'd unscrew the 3 screws here and replace it with a different size bridge for setting up multiple cards if you wanted. Here we can see the actual design of the interior of the block. The other ones would have to take them apart. You can see EK have gone away from the older style they used to have, where they had the thick, wavy channels. So they used to have a much higher flow design. These are still fairly wide, so I would have thought the block is still fairly high flow. But with the thinner channels, you'll get, you know, better performance. Not much else to say about the front. And again, you know, fairly standard setup. Similar pattern for the cutout on the gear ends as you'd expect, and the caps. The raised section for the memory, and then a raised section for the GPU itself. The raised section for the GPU is much larger than the AquaComputer block. I don't see why this would be a problem, just pointing it out. And then I mentioned the 4 different versions of this block you could get. There is also, in fact it was released today, the XXL block. And that's exactly the same internals, but it has more on either end. And so it lines up exactly, I'll show you the back plate, which will give you an idea of what size it is. It lines up exactly with the perimeter of the card. Because the internals are the same, the performance is going to be the same. And so it's really just for looks. Do you want to see the PCB? Do you want to have the PCB covered by the block? It's up to you. However, if you want the plexi version, there is no XXL version of that. The XXL only comes in the acetyl. So, that's the EK water block. EK also sent the optional backplate. If you do get the XXL version, you get the backplate included. And that's because EK think that the XXL block is too heavy for you to not use a backplate. So this is the black version. Not 100% sure if there will be a nickel version. In the past there has been, but I would check out the website because I cannot say for sure. So this is aluminum that's being painted black. Very basic, simple, clean look, no more circles, the logo in the corner. I do miss the backplates where they had the EK logo cut out of it, but it's not a big deal. So this is the actual length of the card, and so the XXL block would be the same size as this. So to give you an idea, let's line them up. And so the XXL block would be, you know, all the way to this end and all the way to that end. So just to give you an idea, that's how big, that's how much larger the XXL is. It's pretty hard to see, but there are raised sections again, and also lowered sections. So the raised sections here will be for the memory. Titan does have memory on the back of the card, which is pretty unusual for an Nvidia card. And that's because it has so much memory, it has 6 gig. And so there just wasn't space on the card, and so they had to put the memory in the back. There's a little divot in the middle for the GPU. Well, not the GPU itself, but probably the decoupling capacitors on the back of it. And then you can see, where the screws come through. And a couple more holes so that the water block can be mounted. Because you'll see on the back there's only a few holes on there. There's 4, in fact. Only 4 screws to hold this on, which is good and bad. It means that it means it has a cleaner look. Some of the earlier ones had a lot more, and basically you had to screw on the block and the back plate together. This one you don't. You'd attach the block and then you screw this on afterwards. Somebody would say that the back plate is really not necessary. Back plates are mainly there to stop the card from sagging when you have a heavy water block on the card in the tower case. The card has a tendency to sag down. The back plate helps to reduce that. But obviously if you don't have any screws down here, I would have thought it wouldn't be doing as much of a job as it could have been doing. Not a big deal, I'm sure it helps. There is presumably some cooling benefit to having the back plate be thermally attached to the memory, but a lot of people are saying on Titan that the memory temperatures are not crazy anyway, so you shouldn't really have a problem. And it's doubtful whether the backplate will give you a performance increase. It's really there for, to help with the sag, is what I've been told, but we'll see. Hopefully we'll be able to find that out as part of the thermal test. So, the Koolance block. Again, Koolance have a very distinctive theme with their packaging, much like the other 2 companies. Every box is black and white, like this, and then the boxes are pretty standard, and then they just add in stickers for the exact model number. So let's get this opened. So the Koolance block does include a back plate. Why can I not say that? Unlike the 2 others that we've received so far. However, the back plate is a small back plate. If you compare that to the size, I'm not going to take it out of the bag, but you can see the EK one is much bigger. The Koolance one only is for part of the card. And we'll go through that more in a second. Inside the goodies bag, you got the instructions, and then you got 2 well, not super thick, they are fairly thick, but super large thermal pad mats. So you have plenty to spare. You also have some thermal paste in the bag, and then your screws and washers. And then the block itself. I have to say, I've seen the photos online of the block. Got launched last week sometime. I think later in the, no, maybe, well, pretty recently. And I saw the photos and it looked good. It looked good, but I didn't think it was a lot better than the others. I have to say, I think this is really sexy in person. They have the Koolance logo that they've kind of milled out of the block itself, so it's 3-dimensional, which is nice. And then you've got the etching into the nickel-plated, I'm not sure if it's stainless steel or, it's probably stainless steel, I imagine, this plate. With the part number. And then some, all the blocks are going to have a similar setup on the back. The raised and raised sections they're more raised than the other blocks. It doesn't really make a big deal of difference. Again, the GPU area is on the smaller side, like the AquaComputer. As long as it's covering the whole top side of the GPU, it's not a problem. So don't worry about that. And we'll check that later, don't worry. I don't have measurements of the GPU with me, so I can't say absolutely that it's big enough, but I'm sure it is. the raised areas for the memory. Judging by the amount of thermal pad they give you, I'm pretty sure they're expecting you to use thermal pads rather than tin, like AquaComputer does. And then the compound raised and lowered sections for the VRMs and the caps and everything else that goes in there. I really like the look of the block. I really do think, out of the three I've seen so far, it's actually, I think, the sexiest. One thing I'm less keen on is the size of the backplate. It's designed to exactly line up with the card. So all the holes go through, so again you'll be attaching both at one time. Honestly, it looks cool here, but the photo Koolance published of it on the back of the board itself, I thought it looked a bit kind of, I don't know, a bit like it was wearing a wife beater or something. It looked a bit incomplete. I do wish they'd given us a full backplate. I really do. Because to me, I'd rather have it bare PCB or backplate. I don't particularly want something in the middle, you know what I mean? So that's my only really complaint. But I really do like the look of the block. It is much thicker. It's definitely not a single slot block in the way that the AquaComputer block might be. It's thicker even in the UK. It's pretty chunky. And it feels pretty weighty too. Koolance don't offer bridges like AquaComputer and EK do. It is something I'd like to see them do. It's not necessary, but it is a nice feature. So that's about all we've got for today. Do subscribe to the channel, youtube.com/user/extremerigs.net, or go to my website, extremerigs.net, if you want to find out what I've been up to. And if you're into that social media stuff, you can also follow me on Facebook at facebook.com/extremerigs. So that's the public service announcement, and stay tuned, we'll have more blocks coming in soon. Big thanks to these companies, AquaComputer, Koolance and EK, for sponsoring the blocks. Big thanks to EVGA for sponsoring the Titan. And we'll have results as soon as we can. That's it for now.